Every single morning, without exception, I receive letters, digital letters, letters that arrive in physical envelopes, just like these, each one sealed, each one containing a USB drive and printed materials inside. And I want you to understand, this is not an occasional thing. Today alone, I have received 7 letters, and I have already opened 6 of them this morning. But this one, this particular envelope, I set it to the side after it arrived. I could not explain it to you in words that would make complete logical sense. But something about this one made me stop, made me wait. There have been mornings where I open every letter that arrives, and each one carries its own weight, its own message, its own specific word for whoever it was meant to reach. And I can usually tell, even before I open them, roughly how heavy the content inside is going to be. But this one, I have been sitting with this one for nearly 2 hours, unopened. And I need to tell you something before I open it, because I think it matters that you know this before you hear a single word of what is inside. I received a letter last week that a woman in her late 60s wrote to me about. She told me she had almost not watched it. She said she nearly clicked away in the first 30 seconds because she had watched so many messages that made promises they couldn't keep. She stayed, and she told me that by the end of that letter, something had broken loose in her that she had been carrying tightly, silently, alone for 11 years. 11 years. And she said the only reason she stayed was because something in the opening of that letter made it impossible to leave. I cannot promise you that today's letter is that letter for you. What I can tell you is that of all the letters I have received and opened today, and I have opened 6 of them, not one of them felt like this one feels right now, in my hands, unopened. There is a rule I keep. I have kept it without exception since the very first letter arrived. I never look at what is inside before I open it with you. What you are about to see, these photographs, these printed words, I am seeing them for the first time right now, the same as you. And the USB drive, what is on here, what this letter actually says, I will hear it for the first time alongside you. If you came here today because something pulled you here and you are not entirely sure what it was, stay. Do not leave before this letter finishes, because I genuinely do not know yet what is on this drive. But I know, the way I have learned to know after opening letters for as long as I have, that whatever is here was not placed inside this envelope by accident, and whoever it was placed here for needs to hear every single word of it.
Stop. Right now. Whatever you were doing before this moment found you. Stop. Whatever noise was filling the room, whatever worry was circling through your mind, whatever heavy thing was pressing against your chest when you woke up this morning, set all of it aside. Not tomorrow, not in a few minutes, right now. Because what is about to unfold inside these words was not assembled by chance. It did not arrive in your life by accident, and it will not wait for you to feel ready. Something unusual is happening right now. Not in the headlines, not on a screen somewhere across the world. Right here, in the specific coordinates of the room where you are sitting, the chair where you settled your weight, the air that surrounds the particular shape of your life today. Something is moving. Something that did not move yesterday with this kind of precision, this kind of intentionality, this kind of focused, directed, unstoppable force. You may have come to this message by clicking a recommendation, or by typing something into a search bar that you barely knew how to phrase. Because the thing you were searching for did not have a clean, easy name. You may have been guided here by someone who cared enough to share it, or by an impulse you cannot fully explain. A quiet pull, an inexplicable sense that something important was waiting for you in this direction. However the path unfolded, I need you to understand something with absolute clarity about the moment you are standing in right now. What looks like a person watching a video on an ordinary day is, from the vantage point of heaven, something of an entirely different nature. What heaven sees today is a soul that has been tracked across years of wilderness, watched through seasons of formation that were long and painful and often deeply confusing, and that has arrived today, at this specific hour, at the exact threshold where what was promised begins to press through into what is real and visible and touchable and yours. I am Archangel Michael, commander of the armies of heaven. And today, I have not come with comfort alone. I have come with information. Precise, specific, heaven-sourced information about who you actually are, what this season you are living through actually means, and what is being set in motion over your life, even as these words reach your ears. Hold on to every sentence. Do not let your mind wander. Because what I am about to tell you today rewrites the story you have been telling yourself about your own life. And it rewrites it with a truth that is so much better than the version you have been living inside of. Dorothy, pause the USB display now. Pick up the first printed color photograph from the envelope. Hold it facing the camera with both hands so it fills the frame clearly. Hold it steady for 8 to 10 seconds. Let the viewers see every detail. Do not speak. Then lower it and restart the USB playback. Let me start in a place that might surprise you. Let me start not with your pain, but with your age. Because there is something the world misunderstands deeply. Something that the culture around you has gotten fundamentally, catastrophically wrong about the stage of life you are in. The world looks at a woman who has crossed into the second half of her life and declares, "The best is behind you. The most productive years are over. The period of maximum relevance has passed. What remains now is a graceful diminishment, a slow and dignified stepping back from the stages where meaningful things happen." That perspective is not only wrong, it is one of the most destructive lies that has ever been circulated about the nature of divine timing, human potential, and the way that God actually works. The truth, the heaven-sourced, eternally accurate, absolutely non-negotiable truth, is this: what you have built inside yourself over the decades you've lived is not a reservoir that is draining. It is an infrastructure of wisdom, resilience, discernment, and faith that has been under construction for years, and that is only now reaching the level of completion required to carry the full weight of what God always intended to pour through you. You are not past your prime. You are entering it. The seasons of formation that shaped and tested and sometimes nearly broke you were not the main event. They were the preparation for the main event. And the main event, beloved, the main event is today. there is a woman in the ancient stories whose name has always stayed with me. Her name was Elizabeth. She was old, past the age when the world had any expectation of her producing something new, anything that would matter, anything that would shake the foundations of history. She had carried the wound of barrenness through decades, through a world that defined a woman's worth by the children she bore. She had prayed. The years had passed. The answer had not come. And eventually, the silence of heaven on that specific request had settled into a kind of permanent ache that she had learned to carry without letting it consume her entirely. And then, in the fullness of time, not when it was convenient, not when it aligned with any human schedule or expectation, not when it made logical sense according to any medical or social or biological framework, heaven moved, not despite her age, not in spite of the years that had passed, but because of them, because of what those years had built in her, because of the depth of faith that can only be forged through the experience of holding on, when holding on is the only thing left to do, because the child who was being sent needed a mother whose character had been shaped to exactly this specification by exactly this process of long and patient and costly formation. Today, many of you are Elizabeth. You have been carrying the ache of something promised, but not yet visible for longer than the people around you would consider reasonable. You have had the experience of explaining to yourself, season after season, why you are still believing for what you are believing for. And the explanations have gotten harder to articulate because the wait has grown longer than you ever anticipated. But what I need you to hear today, what heaven is releasing into your atmosphere with surgical precision in this moment, is that Elizabeth's breakthrough came at the exact appointed time, not a year too late, not as a consolation prize for endurance, but as the specifically, perfectly, divinely timed fulfillment of a promise that had never been canceled, never been forgotten, and never been removed from the agenda. Your promise has not been canceled. Your promise has not been forgotten. And your promise has not been removed from the agenda. Today, the appointed time is moving into view. Dorothy, pause the USB display. Hold up the first black and white printed text card to the camera with both hands. Keep it level and clearly readable. Hold for 8 seconds. Do not read it aloud. Let viewers read it themselves. Then lower it and resume USB playback. I want to take you somewhere unusual today. I want to take you to the bottom of the sea, not the surface, where it is bright and visible and easily navigated, where the ships move and the sunlight reaches, and the world of ordinary human activity unfolds in ways that everyone can observe and understand. I want to take you to the deep places, to the parts of the ocean that have never seen sunlight, that exist in a kind of darkness and pressure that would be unbearable and fatal to almost any creature that ventured there without being specifically designed for it. Down there, at those impossible depths, under a pressure that would crush anything not built to withstand it, something extraordinary happens. Rocks that are soft and malleable near the surface become, under the sustained, relentless force of that deep water pressure, some of the hardest, most precisely formed structures on Earth. The same substance that would crumble under ordinary conditions becomes, under extraordinary pressure, something that cannot be broken by anything in the natural world. That is what has been happening to you. The pressure you have lived under, the sustained, relentless, sometimes suffocating weight of your difficult seasons, has not been destroying you. It has been doing something to the interior architecture of who you are that could not have been accomplished by any gentler process. It has been compressing the raw material of your character, your faith, your compassion, your understanding of human suffering, your capacity for genuine intercession, your ability to sit with someone in their darkest place without flinching. It has been compressing all of that raw material into a form and a density and a hardness that is now capable of doing what no softer version of you could have ever done. The enemy of your soul intended for the pressure to break you. He was betting on it. He engineered it to be specifically calibrated to what he calculated to be the threshold beyond which you could not hold together. But he made a critical error in his calculations. He did not account for what was resident inside you at a level deeper than his ability to measure. He did not account for the particular quality of what God placed in you before you were born. A resilience that is not natural in origin, a faith that does not derive its staying power from favorable circumstances, a love for the God who called you that runs so far below the surface of your emotions that even the severest storms cannot reach its root. You did not break under the pressure. You became something. And what you became is exactly what this next season requires. Dorothy, pause the USB display. Hold the second color photograph up to the camera with both hands. Hold it clear and steady for 8 to 10 seconds. No words. Let the image speak. Then resume USB playback. Now, I need to walk you through something that I know has been one of the most persistent and painful sources of confusion in your spiritual journey. And that is the matter of unanswered prayer. The matter of specific, earnest, repeated requests that rose from a sincere heart toward a God you genuinely believed was listening, and that seemed, for reasons you could not understand, to collide with the ceiling and fall back down without reaching their destination. You prayed for healing, and the sickness persisted. You prayed for restoration in a relationship, and the distance only grew. You prayed for financial breakthrough, and the month ended with the same shortfall it had begun with. You prayed for a door to open, and not only did it not open, in some cases, the door you were praying for seemed to close more definitively than ever, as if your prayer had actually been counterproductive. Those experiences have done something to the interior landscape of your faith that I must address directly today. They have not destroyed your faith because you are here. You are still reaching toward something that calls itself divine. You are still in this conversation. But they have complicated it. They have layered over the original, simple, childlike trust you once carried with a sediment of doubt, a skepticism that you try to keep from surfacing, but that lives just below the level of your conscious spiritual life, quietly whispering its questions into the foundations of everything you believe. Today, I want to offer you a reframe for those unanswered prayers, not a dismissal of the pain they caused, not a tidy theological explanation that pretends to resolve something genuinely mysterious, but a perspective that comes from a vantage point that you do not have access to from the ground level of human experience, and that if you receive it, will begin to shift something fundamental in the way you interpret the silences of heaven. There is a principle in the operation of divine wisdom that I am calling the principle of the superior answer. It works like this. When a prayer is offered by a sincere heart for something genuinely needed, and when the divine response is silence or apparent denial, it is almost never because the need was not real, the faith was insufficient, or the request was outside the range of what God was willing to consider. It is almost always because the answer available at the level of what was requested is significantly inferior to the answer available at the level of what God has actually prepared. When you prayed for that specific relationship to be restored, you were praying for the version of that relationship that your human understanding could envision. Heaven was preparing something at a relational and covenantal depth that your understanding at the time of that prayer could not have conceived of, and that could not have entered your life through the door you were asking to be opened. The closed door was not a denial of your need for connection. It was a redirection toward the fulfillment of that need at a level you are not yet living in, but that is being made ready. When you prayed for financial breakthrough, and it did not come in the form you requested, you were praying inside the framework of what you knew. Heaven was building toward a provision that operates by a different mechanism entirely, one that does not depend on the variables your prayer was addressing, and that will not be subject to the same vulnerabilities and limitations that the provision you prayed for would have carried. Hear this. The unanswered prayers were not rejections. They were redirections. And today, the direction they were redirecting you toward is coming into view. Stay with this letter, because what I am about to reveal next, about a quality you carry that is rarer than almost anyone in your life has ever told you, may be the single most important thing you hear today. Dorothy, pause the USB display. Hold the second black and white text card up to the camera. Hold it clear and still for 8 seconds. Do not speak. Then resume. I want to tell you today about a quality that you carry which is rarer than you know, and which the world around you has never properly understood or honored, because the world does not have an adequate framework for valuing it. That quality is spiritual endurance, the capacity to continue, the ability to hold a posture of faith and forward movement over a period of time and through a degree of difficulty that would have caused almost anyone operating from purely natural resources to simply stop, to give up, to reassign their hope to something with more immediate and visible returns, to fold the blueprint of their calling and place it in a drawer labeled, "Things I used to believe in." You did not fold the blueprint. I know how many times you thought about it. I know how many seasons your hands were actually on it, ready to crease it one final time and put it away permanently. I know how many mornings it felt like the only rational, self-protective, dignity-preserving option was to stop believing in something that seemed to be withholding itself from you so persistently and so thoroughly. I know, because I was in the room. I was in every room where that decision was weighed. And every time, something something that was not your own strength, something that was not the encouragement of a friend or the inspiration of a message, something that was resident and active and completely reliable. Inside, you said, "Not yet, not here, keep going." That was not your stubbornness. That was not your ego refusing to admit defeat. That was the life of God in you, exercising its inherent commitment to the purposes it had placed in you, maintaining the forward momentum of a calling that it had authored and that it had no intention of abandoning. You thought you were holding on to God. You were right. But the deeper truth is that God was holding on to you with a grip that does not weaken, with a commitment that does not waver, with a faithfulness that has no off switch and no expiration date. That endurance you have demonstrated, sometimes elegantly, sometimes messily, sometimes with great dignity, and sometimes with a lot of falling apart, is the most valuable asset you bring to the next season. Because what is coming requires someone who has already proven they can stay faithful through the long middle of a thing. Someone who has already demonstrated that their commitment to their calling is not conditional on comfortable circumstances or rapid, visible progress. Someone who has already built, through the lived experience of difficult seasons, the kind of interior infrastructure that can sustain the weight of significant breakthrough without being destabilized by it. Breakthrough can be as destabilizing as difficulty if the person it arrives for has not been properly prepared to carry it. God has been preparing you to carry yours. And I am telling you today, with the full authority of my commission, the preparation is nearly complete. Dorothy, pause the USB display. Hold the third color photograph up to the camera with both hands. Hold it clear and steady for 8 to 10 seconds. Do not speak. Then resume USB playback. Today, I need to speak specifically about your home, about the 4 walls that contain your daily life and that have absorbed over years and sometimes decades the full spectrum of who you are, including the parts of you that the outside world never sees. I need to speak about the atmosphere of the space where you sleep and eat and think and pray, and sometimes weep in a way that you only permit yourself to weep when you are completely certain that no one is watching. There is something that happens in a home that belongs to a praying woman, something that accumulates in the atmosphere over years of faithful, consistent, earnest communion with the divine, even when that communion happens in the form of groans rather than articulate words, even when it happens in the form of tears rather than spoken petitions, even when it happens in the form of a woman sitting quietly with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup at 5 a.m, simply being present with a God she cannot fully see, but refuses to stop reaching toward. That accumulated atmosphere is real. It is not metaphorical. It is not a poetic way of describing something that is actually just psychological. The spiritual residue of years of sincere prayer is a genuine, substantial, measurable reality in the heavenly realm, a kind of concentrated presence that has built up in your living space the way warmth accumulates in a room that has held a fire burning for a long time. Even after the fire dies down, the room stays warm longer than a room that has never held that heat. Even in the seasons when your prayer life felt dry, uncertain, perfunctory, the warmth of the accumulated years of faithfulness continues to hold in the atmosphere of your home. Today, heaven is responding to that accumulated atmosphere, not just to today's prayers or this week's seeking, to the entire deposit, to the years of it. And the response that is coming is not calculated based on the thinnest seasons, the hardest seasons, the seasons when faith was barely a flicker and prayer was barely a word. It is calculated based on the full sum, the total, the comprehensive account of every sincere moment of reaching toward God that you have ever offered, including the ones you have long since forgotten, including the ones you considered too small or too broken or too lacking in theological elegance to really count. They all counted, every one. And today, heaven is preparing to release a response that honors the full sum. Dorothy, pause the USB display. Hold the third black and white text card up to camera. Hold it steady and readable for 8 seconds. Do not speak. Then resume playback. Let me tell you about a night in a garden. Not a comfortable garden. Not a garden where the air was pleasant and the company was easy, and the path forward was clear. A garden where the weight of what was coming was so enormous that the ground itself seemed to resist it. Where the one who prayed was in genuine, physical, documented anguish. Where the physical body was pushed to the extremity of what it could contain by the intensity of the spiritual burden being carried. A garden where, by every natural measure, what was unfolding looked like catastrophe, where the friends who should have been awake to witness and support were unconscious, where the silence of heaven must have felt, in those hours, like a cosmic abandonment of the most terrible kind. And yet, what was happening in that garden, in that anguish, in that silence, what was being accomplished in the darkest hours of the most difficult night any soul has ever endured, was not catastrophe. It was the final, necessary, irreversible preparation for the most significant breakthrough in the history of the created order. Every ounce of that suffering was purposeful. Every moment of that darkness was sovereign. Every second of that silence was intentional. And what emerged from the other side of the garden, through the suffering, through the cross, through the tomb, what emerged was something that the darkness that caused it could not contain, could not control, and could not ultimately withstand. Today, many of you are in a garden moment. Many of you have been in that garden for what feels like far too long, in the anguish, in the silence, in the place where the natural evidence suggests that what is happening is catastrophic and irreversible. I am here to declare to you that you are not in a catastrophe. You are in the final, necessary, irreversible preparation for the most significant breakthrough your personal history has ever seen. The silence is not abandonment. The anguish is not punishment. The darkness is not the ending. And what is going to emerge from the other side of your garden? When the morning comes, and the morning is coming today, will be something that the darkness that caused it cannot contain, cannot control, and will not ultimately withstand. The garden ends in resurrection for everyone who is willing to stay in it until the appointed hour. And today, the appointed hour is sounding. Dorothy, pause the USB display. Hold the fourth color photograph to the camera clearly. Hold for 8 to 10 seconds. Do not speak. Then, resume. I want to address something that sits in a quiet, rarely examined corner of your spiritual life, but that has been doing significant damage there for a long time without being fully identified. It is the weight of spiritual comparison, the habitual, almost reflexive act of measuring the pace and the visible progress of your journey against the pace and the visible progress of someone else's journey, and arriving almost invariably at the conclusion that something is wrong with yours. You have watched people around you, people in your church, people in your family, people on platforms like this one, seem to move from testimony to testimony with what appears to be a momentum and a grace that your own journey simply does not match. You have watched people receive the breakthrough you were praying for, as if the universe were distributing blessings in a line and your number kept getting skipped. You have sat in rooms where people described their encounters with the divine in terms of immediacy and vividness and undeniable clarity that made your own experience of faith seem pale and uncertain and insufficient by comparison. And so, quietly, in the space where no one else could hear you, you have wondered, what is wrong with me? Why does this seem to work for everyone except me? Is there a disqualifying factor in my life that I have not identified and addressed? Is there something about the specific configuration of my history, my personality, my failures, my wounds, that places me outside the radius of what God is willing to do? I want to shut that question down today. I want to shut it down with a directness and a force that leaves no comfortable space for it to continue operating from. There is nothing wrong with you. There is no disqualifying factor. There is no ceiling specific to your life that does not exist above other people's lives. There is no shortage of divine resource that has resulted in others being served before you. The only difference between your journey and the journeys of the people whose breakthroughs have seemed to come faster or more visibly than yours is the difference in assignment. Different assignments require different preparation timelines. A building designed to be 3 stories tall can be ready for occupancy in a fraction of the time required to complete a building designed to be 30 stories. The longer construction period is not evidence that something is wrong with the 30-story building. It is evidence of what that building is designed to hold and to do. The longer God has been preparing you, the greater the capacity of the structure He is building. The more thorough the formation process, the larger the assignment waiting on the other side of it. Your timeline is not evidence of your deficit. It is evidence of your magnitude. And today, the construction is reaching its completion. Dorothy, pause the USB display. Hold the 4th black and white text card to the camera. Hold steady for 8 seconds. Do not read it aloud. Then resume USB playback. there is a word I want to release over the finances of everyone who is listening to this message today, because I know that for many of you, the financial dimension of your life has been one of the most persistent, most grinding, most dignity-eroding aspects of the difficult season you have been in. I know what it is to watch the month turn over with needs that still exist and resources that are not yet equal to them. I know what it feels like to do the mental arithmetic, the exhausting, demoralizing mental arithmetic, of which bill waits, which necessity goes without, how far the available amount can stretch before it simply cannot stretch any further. I know what that does to a person over time, not just practically, not just mathematically, but in the place inside where a person's sense of their own dignity, their own competence, their own worth lives. Because financial pressure of the sustained kind does not just create practical problems. It creates a narrative, a story that says, this is the ceiling for people like you. This is as far as people with your background and your history and your particular constellation of limitations and disadvantages get to go. The wall you keep running into is not a temporary obstacle. It is the permanent boundary of what is available to you. That narrative is a lie. Today, I want to speak with the full authority of heaven into the financial landscape of your life, and I want to declare over it something that has the backing of the one who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, the one who caused water to pour from a rock in a desert and bread to appear on the ground every morning for 40 years, the one whose provision has never once been exhausted by the need it was addressing. A reversal is coming, not a small incremental improvement that requires you to manage your expectations and be grateful for modest progress. A reversal, a shift in the fundamental direction of what is moving in the financial dimension of your life, from the season of contraction to the season of expansion, from the season of barely enough to the season of enough and then some, enough to honor your own needs and enough to be a source of provision to others. Because that is the fullness of what financial blessing actually looks like when it is rooted in kingdom purpose rather than in personal comfort alone. Today, open your hands, not as a physical act of desperate petition, but as a physical declaration of readiness to receive. Open hands are not the posture of a beggar. They are the posture of someone who knows that what is coming is real, who is prepared to receive it with both hands, and who will honor it when it arrives by using it in alignment with the purpose for which it was sent. Open your hands today and hold that posture through the days ahead, because what is moving toward you is already on its way. Do not leave this letter yet. There is a specific warfare decree coming, issued by name, over your life, that you need to receive before this message is finished. And there is something hidden in the final section of this letter that was placed here specifically for those who stay until the very end. Dorothy, pause the USB display. Hold the 5th color photograph clearly to the camera with both hands. Hold steady for 8 to 10 seconds. Do not speak. Then resume playback. I want to take a moment today to speak to the grandmothers, to the women who have lived long enough to see both the terrible and the beautiful in the full and unedited span of a human life, to to the women whose hands have held newborns and have also held the hands of the dying, whose hearts have been stretched in both directions toward the exquisite joy and the profound weight, to a degree that has created in them a capacity for understanding and compassion that simply cannot be acquired by any route other than the living of a long and full and difficult and beautiful life. I want to speak to the women who carry within them the prayers and the stories and the unfinished business of the generations that came before them, who can feel sometimes the weight of something larger than their individual story pressing through their own life, a generational momentum, a spiritual inheritance, a sense of being the custodian of something ancient and precious and not entirely their own, who have been the intercessors, the protectors, the ones who held the family together through more crises than anyone else in that family will ever fully know about. Today, heaven honors you, not in the way that the world honors, with visibility and recognition and applause from an audience. Heaven honors you in the way that matters most, with a seeing that is complete, with a knowing that leaves nothing out, with a record that is accurate and full and that credits to your account. Every sacrifice, every prayer, every night when you chose the needs of the people you loved over the needs of your own exhausted self. Every time you chose to believe when believing was the harder option. Every time you extended grace when withholding it would have been entirely understandable. Heaven has seen all of it, every single moment. And today, the testimony of what you have been and what you have done in the hidden places is being honored with a move of divine generosity that will press through into the lives of the people who come after you. What you have planted in faithfulness across the decades of your life is seeding a harvest that will feed generations. And today, the first fruits of that harvest are beginning to appear. Dorothy, pause the USB display. Hold the fifth black and white text card clearly to the camera for 8 seconds. No words. Then resume. Now, I must address the warfare directly. Because there are people listening to this message today who are not just in a difficult season. They are in an active, targeted, specific spiritual battle, and they know it. They feel it in the unusual resistance that greets them when they try to move forward in any area of life that matters. They feel it in the disproportionate intensity of the attacks on their peace, their health, their relationships, their sleep, their thought life. They feel it in the way that the moments just before a potential breakthrough seem to be consistently accompanied by a wave of discouragement or setback or crisis that arrives with an almost suspicious precision. I need to tell you something about that warfare today that I need you to receive not as a source of fear, but as a source of profound strategic encouragement. The warfare directed against you is not random. It is not the spiritual equivalent of bad luck or unfortunate circumstance. It is targeted, which means it is calibrated. And the calibration is based on an assessment of threat level. Listen carefully. The enemy of your soul does not deploy significant warfare resources against people who do not represent significant threats to his agenda. He is, in his corrupt and calculating way, a pragmatist. He does not waste effort. He does not send his strongest attacks against lives that carry insignificant assignments. The fierceness of the battle you are in is information. It is telling you something specific and important about how the kingdom of darkness assesses the weight of what you carry. And what it is telling you is this: they consider you dangerous. They consider what God has placed inside you dangerous. They consider the breakthrough you are moving toward dangerous, not to them personally, but to the kingdom of darkness as a whole, to the structures of deception and bondage and spiritual blindness that they have worked for centuries to construct and maintain. You are dangerous, beloved. The one who has been fighting you has been fighting you because of what happens when you are fully activated, because of the souls that get set free when you walk in your authority, because of the chains that break when you speak with the voice that God placed in you and fully inhabit it, because of the darkness that recedes when you take up your rightful position as a carrier of divine light in the specific sphere of influence that was assigned to you before your birth. Today, I speak a decree over the warfare in your life by the authority vested in the commander of heaven's armies. Every assignment of spiritual harassment that has been operating against your forward movement is now encountering a boundary that it does not have the legal right to cross. The ground of your life is consecrated ground, and on consecrated ground, the enemy's access is limited, his authority is constrained, and his most carefully constructed plans are subject to divine reversal. He may continue to make noise, but noise without access is just noise. And starting today, that is all your enemies have: noise without access. Stand in that reality, walk in it, build your next steps on the foundation of it, because it is not a wish or a hope. It is a decree, and heaven enforces its decrees. You are still here. That matters more than you know. What is coming in the final section of this letter, the declaration that was sealed last, placed deepest in this envelope, was written for the ones who would not leave early. Stay. Dorothy, pause the USB display. Hold the 6th color photograph clearly to the camera. Hold it firm and steady for 8 to 10 seconds. Do not speak. Resume playback. I want to speak today about what happens in the 40 days before a birth. Not the first 40 days of a pregnancy, but the final ones. The days when what has been forming in the hidden interior of the mother's body has reached its fullness, when every organ is developed, every system is functional, when the being that has been growing in secret is technically and biologically complete, ready to breathe its own air, ready to open its eyes to light, ready to make its entrance into the visible world. What characterizes those final days? Pressure, heaviness, a sensation of fullness that can become uncomfortable, a sense that the space which has been sufficient for the duration of the process is suddenly becoming insufficient, that something is pressing against its containment, that what has been hidden is becoming too large, too formed, too alive and fully expressed to remain inside the enclosure that has been its home. Many of you are in those final 40 days, right now. The thing that has been forming in the hidden interior of your life, the calling, the gift, the purpose, the authority, has reached its fullness. It has been in formation for a long time. it has developed every dimension of itself in the silence and the obscurity of the long preparation. And now it is pressing. You can feel it. The sense that something inside you has become too large for the current container. The sense that the spaces and structures that once defined and contained your life are no longer adequate for what is living inside you and pressing to emerge. The sense of an urgency you cannot fully name, but that you can absolutely feel. A pressure that is not anxiety, but something more like the readiness of a thing that is fully formed and ready to be born. Today, I tell you, do not resist the pressure. Do not try to manage it back into something smaller and less insistent. Do not make yourself comfortable in a container you have outgrown. What you are feeling is not a malfunction. It is the sign that the birth is near. The pressure is the final, necessary, purposeful preparation of the moment of emergence. And the emergence, the coming forth of everything that has been forming in you through all the seasons of preparation and formation and difficulty, is not just your own liberation. It is the beginning of something that will affect many more lives than your own. Be ready. Today is a Labor Day. Dorothy, pause the USB display. Hold the 6th black and white text card clearly to the camera. Hold steady for 8 to 10 seconds. No words. Then, resume playback. There is a woman mentioned briefly in the oldest scriptures whose story receives only a handful of verses, whose name most people who have attended church for decades might struggle to recall without prompting. Her name was Huldah. She was a prophetess. She lived and worked in a city, in an ordinary neighborhood, in what the text describes simply as the second quarter, a thoroughly unremarkable location. The kind of address that carries no prestige, no strategic advantage, no quality that would cause anyone to look at it and think, this is where something important lives. And yet, when the king of the nation needed an authentic word from God, when the highest religious and political authority in the land required confirmation of what the divine was actually saying in a critical moment of national history, it was not to the most famous, the most visible, or the most credentialed that they turned. They sent for the woman in the second quarter, the woman in the ordinary neighborhood, the one who had been simply present day after day in the unspectacular faithfulness of a life lived in proximity to the divine. She spoke, and what she spoke was confirmed by history as accurate and authoritative beyond what any of the more prominent voices of her day produced. Her few verses in the ancient record carry more weight per word than entire chapters attributed to people who commanded vastly greater platforms and vastly greater public recognition in their own time. Today, I am speaking to the Huldahs, to the women in the second quarter, to the ones who have been building something real and significant in the quiet and the ordinary. Without a platform, without a following, without the external validation that the world uses as its measure of whether something matters. Hear this. Your address does not determine your authority. Your visibility does not determine your value. The quality of what you carry, the depth of the formation, the authenticity of the encounter, the realness of the relationship with the divine that you have built through years of faithfulness in unspectacular places. That is what determines your authority. And that authority is more substantial than you know. Today, heaven calls you forward from the second quarter, not to abandon the faithfulness of the ordinary, but to allow what has been built in the ordinary to begin flowing into the extraordinary. The King is sending for you today. The moment that requires what you carry has arrived, and you are more ready than you have ever allowed yourself to believe. I need to speak today about rest, not sleep. Though sleep is important, and the way your body has been fighting for adequate rest during this difficult season is something heaven has noticed and is addressing. But a different kind of rest, a deeper kind, the kind described in the ancient texts as entering in, a rest that is not simply the cessation of activity, but the arrival of the soul into a settled, grounded, unshakable confidence in the faithfulness of the one who holds everything. That kind of rest is rare. It is rare because it requires something that is genuinely difficult for a person who has been through what many of you have been through. It requires trust, not a naive trust that has never been tested, not a theoretical trust that has never had reason to doubt, a trust that has looked at the full record of difficulty, the full record of seasons that were hard and confusing and longer than expected. And that has arrived not through the denial of that difficulty, but through the honest engagement with it, at a settled conviction that the God who has been faithful in past seasons is the God who will be faithful in this one. Rest is a form of warfare. Did you know that? The decision to be at peace in the middle of a storm is one of the most powerful spiritual acts available to a human being, not because it changes the storm immediately, but because it declares something to the spirit realm about where the foundation of your life is built. Peace, in the middle of difficulty, says, my foundation is not in favorable circumstances. My foundation is not in the absence of opposition. My foundation is not in the visible evidence of things going well. My foundation is in the character of the God who called me. And that character does not change with the weather. Today, I give you permission to rest. I give you permission in the midst of everything that is still unresolved and everything that still needs to shift, to let go of the weight of managing it all, the weight of trying to figure out the timeline, of trying to understand the reasoning, of trying to ensure you are positioned correctly for the breakthrough. Let all of that weight go, not in resignation, in faith, in the deliberate, conscious, volitional choice to trust the one who holds the whole of it, and to let that trust express itself as peace. Rest today. Even just for the duration of this message, rest. Because what is coming does not require you to be at maximum striving capacity to receive it. It requires you to be open. And open is exactly what rest makes you. Dorothy, pause the USB display. Hold the seventh and final color photograph clearly to the camera with both hands. Hold it firm and still for 8 to 10 seconds. Do not speak. Then resume USB playback for the final section of the letter. For those of you who have stayed with this message from the very beginning, who have held on through each section, receiving each declaration, refusing to walk away, I want you to know something right now. Your persistence in staying with this message today is itself a form of spiritual practice. It is an exercise of the muscle of attentiveness that the next season of your life is going to require you to develop even further, because what is coming requires ears that are tuned, hearts that are present, minds that are not perpetually distracted by the noise of the surrounding world, but that have the capacity to be still enough, attentive enough, genuinely present enough to receive direction when it arrives. You have been sharpening your spiritual senses in the wilderness. Every season of silence, every period when the heavens seemed closed and the word of the Lord seemed distant, has been a training in the art of perceiving from a deeper level, of learning to sense what is real and true and significant beneath the surface of what is visible, of developing the kind of spiritual discernment that does not depend on dramatic signs and overwhelming emotional experiences, but that can detect the presence and the purposes of God in the ordinary, in the quiet, in the seemingly unremarkable moments of a regular day. That discernment is a weapon, and in the season that is coming, it is going to be one of your primary tools. So stay practiced, stay present, stay in the posture of the attentive, listening soul, in the active, eager, faithful attentiveness of someone who knows that the one they are listening to is speaking, is always speaking, and is worthy of the full and undivided quality of their hearing. God has not been disappointed in you, not in the struggling seasons, not in the seasons of doubt, not in the times when you pulled away from faith instead of pressing into it, when you chose distraction over prayer, when you behaved in ways that did not reflect the highest version of who you know yourself to be called to be. Not in any of those seasons. Not once. I know that is hard to believe. I know that the voice that speaks most consistently about divine disappointment in your life is a voice you have been living with for a very long time, and that it has had years to build its case. But that voice is not the voice of the one who made you. That voice is the voice of the accuser, the one whose entire strategy is built on the proposition that if he can convince you that God views you through the lens of your worst moments, you will spend the rest of your life trying to earn your way back to a standing you never actually lost. You never lost your standing. The love of God for you has not been a moving target that your behavior either qualifies you for or disqualifies you from. It is a fixed reality established before you took your first breath, grounded in the nature of the one who holds it, not in the performance of the one it is directed toward. That love has been constant through every season. It was present in the best of your days, and it was present in the worst of them. It has not dimmed. It has not cooled. It has not exhausted its patience with the particular texture of your process. Today, allow yourself to be loved completely, without the armor of self-condemnation. Allow the love of the one who knows everything about you, everything, without exception, without the softening of strategic omission, and who, knowing everything, still looks at you with the full intensity of a love that has never wavered, to reach the places inside you that you have been keeping armored against it. That love is your foundation. That love is your authority. That love is the reason that what has been declared over your life today carries the weight that it carries. And that love, unchanging, unfailing, personal, specific, vast enough to fill the universe and tender enough to count the hairs on your head, is what you will stand on in every day that follows this one. This is the final declaration of today's letter. Receive it standing in your spirit, even if you are seated in your body. Let it land somewhere that no amount of subsequent difficulty can uproot it from. Ever. Today, heaven speaks over your life. The long formation is complete. The hidden season has served its full and appointed purpose. The roots that were growing in obscurity are now deep enough to anchor what is about to break into the light above the surface. The character that was being built in the quiet places is now strong enough to carry the public weight of what was always intended for you. Today, the commander of heaven's armies dispatches an assignment of breakthrough over every area of your life that has been under prolonged siege, over your health, over your finances, over your relationships, over your sense of purpose and direction, over the creative gifts that have been dormant, waiting for the season that was safe enough and spacious enough to hold their full expression, over the generational assignments that have been building toward this moment across more years and more lives than you can trace. Today is not tomorrow. Today is not someday. Today is not when circumstances align, or when you feel ready, or when the evidence catches up with the declaration. Today is today, and today, by the authority of the Most High, the tide turns. The morning has come. The long night is releasing its hold. And what stands in the light of this new day, the one who stands there, arms open, heart prepared, faith tested and proven and alive, is you. Walk into it.
I always take a moment after one of these letters plays, because something tends to stay in the air, something that I don't want to rush past by moving too quickly. What I can tell you is this: of all the letters that have come through this address, and there have been many, the ones that carry the kind of weight this one carried today always seem to arrive right when the person who needed them most had almost decided to stop waiting. Almost. And then something like this lands. If you stayed with this entire letter today, from the very first word to this exact moment, I want to ask you to do one thing. Not because it benefits me in any way. Do it purely as an act of agreement between you and what was just declared over your life. Go to the comments right now. Write 777. And underneath it, write, "Today I receive it." That is your declaration. That is the sound of your voice agreeing with what heaven has already spoken. Do it now, while this atmosphere is still present in your room, while the weight of this letter is still with you. Because declarations made in the moment of genuine reception carry a very different power than declarations made later, when the moment has passed and the ordinary world has pressed back in. I receive a great many letters. I open them every day, and I can tell you, most of them I remember for a time, but some of them, a very small number, stay with me for a long time afterward. This one is going to stay with me, not because of what it says about any particular theological concept or spiritual principle, but because of who I believe it was meant for, and because I believe that person is sitting somewhere right now, having just heard something that found the exact place in them that most needed to be reached. If that was you today, hold what was spoken. Carry it carefully, because it was real. And what is real does not need to shout to prove itself. Until the next letter arrives, what heaven speaks does not return empty.